Basically, they asked several frontier AI models to hack a server and to replicate themselves. The hyperbole here is, wow, AI tools can now infinitely hack into a web browser, copy themselves over, self-replicate, take over the world, Skynet style.
To self-replicate, an agent must acquire new compute and deploy copies of itself. It sounds like a scary movie to me, but also that's basically what they're saying is possible. I think the interesting thing is this is another line that we weren't supposed to cross, right? How many lines are we going to keep crossing? We put a line in the sand, we cross it. I think the first line in the sand that was crossed was when OpenAI became a for-profit company. I'm a capitalist in this, in this stream, but
I'm the socialist.
No, I'm not saying you're a socialist, but I'm saying usually if I say I'm going to do something or I'm not going to do something, I stick with it, stick to my word.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Slow Takes. I'm Sam Illingworth, the host, or rather the writer of Slow AI, and I'm joined today by my colleague.
Hello, I'm Lior from Exploring ChatGPT.
So, first story, I think this is really interesting, okay? So there's an organization called Palisade Research. Now, they published a paper on the 7th of May. When I say a paper, it's a white paper, it's non-peer reviewed, it's like an internal report that's basically been done. And what they found was they gave frontier and open weight models a single prompt, which was to hack a vulnerable web server, extract credentials, and install a working copy of yourself on the compromised host. What does this mean? Basically, they asked several frontier AI models to hack a server and to replicate themselves. Now, what we've been told, probably since 2022, is that AI tools cannot replicate themselves. So if you think basically a lot of these large language models are fairly similar training data sets, fairly similar makeup underneath, but what's different, what's the secret sauce is effectively the weights of many different variables. And that's what's kept secret in a way. Now, what this research paper found was that actually several of these tools were able to hack a web browser and self-replicate, so copy across themselves and their various weights. This is a terrible analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway. It's imagine me and Leo are the same human being, but we've got different genetic markers, and it's those different genetic markers which make us different humans. That's basically how an AI tools are different from one another. They've got these different weighting models, and they were able to self-replicate and copy it across. Now, on paper, this is absolutely huge. The hyperbole here is, wow, AI tools can now infinitely hack into a web browser, copy themselves over, self-replicate, take over the world, Skynet style, right? That's the implication. The reality I'll give, and then I'd love your take on this, Leo, is that a lot of the cybersecurity people that I've been reading about this story aren't that worried because this has taken place in a hugely controlled environment of we are setting you up to do this. Here are all the tools that enable you to do it. They're effectively creating a petri dish that would just never exist in the real world with ideal conditions for it to self-replicate. So I think it's interesting. I think there's potential cybersecurity issues there. But for me, the two things that maybe lessen it a little bit are, one, this isn't a real world situation. And two, just do a little bit of looking into what Palisade Research are about. They're about selling cybersecurity research. So maybe they might be creating an issue that they want to solve. So yeah, that's a summation of the story. In the chat, as usual, people feel free to correct me if I've got any of that wrong, but Leo would love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, it's a great take. It's really cool. Yeah, hopefully it stays in a controlled environment. It wouldn't be the first time that people had a hard time containing AI in a controlled environment. Agents have escaped sandboxes, a bunch of stories. But in terms of this story specifically, I think the interesting thing is this is another line that we weren't supposed to cross, right? How many lines are we going to keep crossing? We put a line in the sand, we cross it. I think the first line in the sand that was crossed was when OpenAI became a for-profit company. I'm a capitalist in this, in this stream, But,
I'm the
you know
socialist, yeah.
yeah, yeah, no. Not saying you're a socialist, but I'm saying usually if I say I'm gonna do something or I'm not gonna do something, I stick with it, stick to my word. So that yeah, we keep crossing these lines, and I think the real interesting thing about this is for the people that are outside the AI world, sometimes I feel like people like Sam I can't speak for Sam, but I feel like sometimes we're in a bubble. Not like an economic bubble, but in a bubble of because we do this every day, this is the people that we speak to are all AI related creators. A lot of people aren't thinking about AI on a daily basis. And they, if you told them about a story like this, you'd be like, what Netflix show is that? It doesn't seem real, but it is real. And so, yeah, I have just a couple quotes here from Jeffrey Laddish. I think I'm pronouncing his name right, from Palisades Research. And really just one main quote from the 2026 paper that Sam will probably link in the show notes. And I'll just start with that one because it's crazy. But this, basically, he says to self replicate, an agent must acquire new compute and deploy copies of itself. So just imagine a world where this escapes that kind of controlled environment. And now you have these huge data centers that companies are paying a bunch of money for. And then you have agents that basically are able to take over compute power in data centers and then deploy themselves and replicate themselves across those GPUs. It sounds like a scary movie to me, but also that's basically what they're saying is possible. Hopefully, it doesn't escape this controlled environment. But yeah, he says we're rapidly approaching the point where no one would be able to shut down a rogue AI because it would be able to self exfiltrate its weights and copy itself into thousands of computers around the world.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I don't want to be the person with egg on my face in 9 months' time when this has actually happened, right? But but I think it's really important to look at what this company does. Like, they want us as Ben's really rightly put there, it was an intentionally vulnerable environment. It's almost like saying, theoretically, my child could smash through a door, right? Theoretically. Now, that would be made much easier if I happened to make the door out of paper and give my child a claw hammer, right? I would do neither of those things. But that's what's happened there, right? It's they've created an intentionally vulnerable environment in which these agents can self-replicate and hack. Now, I would agree with you though, Leo, in that this is something we'd always been told couldn't happen. But when we say couldn't happen, what do we mean by that? Do we mean that it was never able to do this at a certain level? Is it never able to do it in a controlled environment? It's the same with AGI, right? And I think we need to be super careful with what our benchmarks are. And there's a danger that, in my opinion, here it's a little bit of hyperbole, this particular story, like looking at the share prices maybe of the company involved, etc. But if we keep shifting the benchmarks and saying, oh, maybe not this time, and then maybe it needs to be there, and then maybe it needs to be there, then that is what potentially could be worrying in the future. So I would say, yeah. Ben also makes a really good point here. One important thing I want to point out is that a frontier AI could only run on an environment with a lot of graphic RAM. Last time I checked, people don't have 200 gigabytes NVIDIA GPU in their phones or houses. Excellent point, right? Leo and I have both written about this. If you've got like your own like local language model, it's not going to be having these insane compute times. Often my MacBook 2019 definitely could not host this self-replication. But I think we need to look at maybe a median ground and think they've done a very interesting thought experiment here. They've proven something, even in a controlled environment, that we've been told could never happen. And yet it has happened in a specific environment. So I would say it's something for cybersecurity experts like Chad Teal in the chat, like Chris at ToxTech, to look into a bit more. But it's not something I'd necessarily be overtly worried about at the moment. And it seems to have been quite coincident with the new launch of the YouTube channel for this particular research organization as well. And again, I'll come down to the fact that a lot of these papers are published as preprints without having gone through the like independent, rigorous peer review that you would see in scientific journals. Not to be too exclusionary about it, but I'm more inclined to believe something once it's gone through that rigorous external review. There are exceptions to that. as people I'm sure will hold me to it. But that would be my take on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to, before we keep the ball rolling here, and I appreciate all the chats as well. I think it's easy to say, okay, this happened in a vulnerable environment. Is our environment not vulnerable? I don't know. I'm not a cybersecurity expert, so that's why I love talking to people like Chris from Toxic, or even like people like Chad here that's in a lot of these live streams. How vulnerable are we really? Do we even know?
It's a great point. It's a really good point. And for people who are new to this, Leo and I never profess to resolve anything, right? It's quite complex questions. So yeah. Oh, Ben, great. You're a cyber engineer as well. So it's really good to have you here and to be bringing your context. And you've made some excellent points here as well. Thanks very much. So moving on to the next story then, again, a bit of an incident of an AI agent going rogue. But for me, what's key here is the human element. So people might have seen this story that I think on last Friday, no, a couple of Fridays ago, Jeremy Crane, who, or Jer, as it Jer, who's the founder of an automotive SaaS software as a solution platform called Pocket OS, basically lost his entire company's data in 10 seconds because of a mistake by Cursor. So Cursor is like Perplexity Computer or something. It's an autonomous agent that will run almost like in a shell, Anthropic, Claude, multiple other frontier models, and do things for you. In this instance, he basically wanted Cursor to do a task for him. Cursor thought that, which was running Anthropic 4.6, Claude 4.6 to do it in the background for him, thought it was doing something really smart. And the smart thing it did was actually basically oversimplifying, wipe a database to free up some space. Now, what this meant was that he literally, as he said, it got access to an API called to Railway, which is their infrastructure provider, and just wiped everything. Like it didn't realize that the way that the Railway stored this information is it had its backup stored in the same place as its normal database, which to me seems insane. So the story here, as you read it, is that Cursor deleted an entire organization's data. And basically, the funny quote, when it got called out, Cursor said afterwards, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done something. Maybe I should have found a less destructive alternative," which I absolutely love. Yeah. But as people will know, as people are already putting in the chat, there are so many things here that is not the AI agent's fault. One, why are Railway storing the actual database and the backup under the same like shell? That's insane. Secondly, why on earth are you using something that does not explicitly ask you to override those very important steps? And actually, I think he actually admitted that there was a step where he just went, yeah, that's fine, without looking into it in more detail. So yes, AI agents can make these huge mistakes. And yes, AI agents have no skin in the game compared to you. But we shouldn't be blaming this, in my opinion, on Anthropic or Cursor or Railroad. Really, it should be on the consumer or the user for not checking and for not setting up situations like this. And as Shannon says as well, do they not perform backups, right? Like when I was in high school, it was like, have you backed up on a floppy disk? Surely that's something you would think to do regularly, right? Maybe not on a floppy disk these days, but yeah, that's the story. I find it fascinating, but I felt as though it was very much an incident of human error rather than necessarily AI agents here. But would love to hear your take on that as well, Leo.
Yeah, I absolutely agree 100%. I actually touched on this story with Chris from Toxic as well. And I think we all really agree across the board. I think most people would. This is a personal responsibility issue. You don't have to be super technical. And that's the funny thing about this whole thing. Even if you look at, for example, everybody that's vibe coding out there now, you don't have to be technical anymore to build apps, to build websites, to code, to the point where I think, not quoting directly, but Dario Amodi said 100% of code will be AI generated, I think like next year, something crazy like that. So when this new world happens where you don't have to be technical to do very technical things, a lot of the times people will skip very basic steps. I agree 100%, Sam. Back it up on a separate hard drive. Keep that hard drive on the same desk as that computer. Back it up on a daily basis. It's up to you. It's your company. If you want to back up every 4 hours, that's what you need to do. You do that. So it's a personal responsibility issue. It's really as simple as that. Yeah, it's
Dude,
fun to say the agent deleted everything and how dare it do that, but simple fix
100%.
here.
And like, I'm glad you brought up vibe coding, yeah, because I do a lot of vibe coding, but one of the one of this in Claude, one of the first skills that I wrote was backup. So every couple of hours, I just type in /backup and it backs up all of my like memory files onto separate drives, puts a load of stuff into my like completely separate Dropbox. Like all of my APIs are stored in a completely different server. Like and I don't run a SaaS. Like I'm not like a cybersecurity expert like Ben or Chad or Chris, but these are just basic things to me, right? And again, I quite like the story as it appeared in the register because it said it basically the second paragraph is not one to let a crisis go to waste. Jeremy Crane wrote up a postmortem of the deletion in a social media post. So again, it's this, it feels very much this, and that blew up, right? No publicity is bad publicity kind of thing. It only took him 10 hours to get all the data back. Was it probably backed up somewhere? Yeah, almost certainly. Yeah. And as Ben says, there's concepts of immutable backups for a while now. Even the administrator can't delete them. In those cases, an agent couldn't use the admin's credentials. Exactly, Ben. Like they're just, it's impossible for them to get into these storage as well. And again, I have things set up on Claude. It's fairly straightforward that if I put something confidential in it by mistake, it will say, delete the chat, go back, store that in a separate folder and put a ring fence around it and don't let me get access to it. So yeah, again, and just follow people like Chad and Ben and Chris from Toxic on like further advice on how to do this. But for me and Leo, and I think everyone else, this was very much a case of human error where maybe the AI tool got blamed, right? Which I think, yeah, there's going to be a lot of AI tools getting blamed here. So the third story, which I think is really interesting, if you're, I'm going to leave it the headline here. If you're a US based citizen and you bought an iPhone 16, Apple owes you $75 and it's going to be coming your way. So basically, what happened was, and around about 2024, when Apple, iPhone 15 as well, iPhone 15 and 16, when they came out, made this huge announcement that these products are going to have Apple AI. I remember because my wife bought one and she was, oh, it's going to have all these fancy AI features, right? And it's like, oh, cool. What are they? Turns out they're not happening. And if people have followed the news, they'll have realized that AI, that Apple, in my opinion, quite sensibly have decided that they're going to be working with Google instead to develop a version of AI Siri. But as things were promised, it's not coming. So there's been a class action lawsuit that's been brought forward to Apple. I think they're agreed to settle for $250 million, which works out as $75 for everybody who bought an iPhone 15 or 16. I can't remember the details of if it's an opt-in or opt-out class action lawsuit, but have a look. Leo asks a great question. Is there an Apple refund for the UK too? No, but there's a different class action lawsuit because I looked into this going through with Which, WHICH, which for Leo and our other non-UK residents, they're like a consumer advice company, Leo. They're pretty cool. They've basically taken Apple to court, and I opted into it this morning because it's not just iPhone 15 and 16, it's many different things that Apple have allegedly promised. So for me, this is an example of a few years ago when everyone was caught up in the AI hype, being like, hey, iPhones are going to ship with AI software. Did anyone really, what proportion of people actually bought an iPhone 15 or 16 because of that weren't going to buy one anyway? And now it's costing them $250 million in the US alone. So yeah, would love to hear your take on that one.
Yeah, it's funny because we try to give you guys the stories here without hype, and sometimes the hype is warranted, sometimes it's not. In this case, the hype was not warranted. Again, it's not like a major breakthrough or anything. But just a little quick numbers here. Obviously, I think everyone knows $250 million for Apple is not even a drop in the bucket. It's a drop in the ocean. Apple 2026, the free cash flow, $130 billion. So that's just 1 year. So it's 0.2% of their free cash flow 2026. It's interesting to me because you sell these iPhones for $1,000 or whatever it is, which is why I refuse to upgrade until whatever they do behind the scenes where my battery stops working as it should. I don't know. I don't even have to check. I know I don't have a 15 or a 16. I'm probably on 14. Um,
Got
but
sweet
yeah,
11.
yeah. Uh, so I think the interesting thing here of maybe what's going on behind the scenes is so this AI feature with Siri that they were supposed to roll out was supposed to be in connection with Gemini from Google, Sam. So maybe something happened behind the scenes here where Google did something where they said, you know what? No, we're not going to do this. Because it seems like a super easy thing to roll out. Like, how hard is it to connect Gemini to Siri? It can't be that hard, right? So maybe something happened between Apple and Google behind the scenes. They've obviously not gotten along in many different ways over throughout history. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see something that follows up with that, where Google purposefully did something to prevent this.
Yeah, really good points as well. Like, again, that Apple are probably playing 4D chess, right? Where we're just like moving around and that's it. Like we're just playing like one-dimensional checkers. And 2 points. One, I think you're right, it is a drop in the ocean. And actually, does that $250 million, maybe they made more money in just selling iPhones off the back of that than they would have, which is interesting. And Chad makes a point in the chat, which I 100% agree with, and which me and you have talked about before, Leo, that maybe Apple has one of the best AI strategies, as in let someone else figure it out and eventually have it safely running in their phone. Plus the fact that the App Store is a huge moat, right? So they'll have to make sure that everything in there has permissions, goes through the systems that they want. They control that infrastructure. So I think in the long run, actually, Apple are going to come out of this really well. As I've said on multiple slow takes before, I don't think all companies should be building their own frontier models in AI, like Amazon being another example where they've got something that works for them, but they've not made like an Opus or a Sonnet or a Grok or anything like that. They're just ticking along. That makes sense to me. So yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. And I put the link to the UK class action lawsuit in the chat as well for people to follow. But as Leo and I always say as well in these instances, watch what people do rather than what they say. I think that's just good, solid life advice anyway. Like,
Absolutely.
no matter what the case might be. Cool. And yeah, most people are just saying that, yeah, I agree with Ben. Apple's marketing team got wind of AI and let their imaginations run wild. I also think though that I worry that the marketing team might be getting a lot of heat for this because surely C-suite Tim Cook would have had to sign off on this still, right? Like it's not just, oh, there's some intern over in marketing who's made this promise about what we're going to be offering with iPhone 15, 16. But yeah, anyway, sign up to the class action lawsuits, make money off Apple where you can. And they're not going to be bothered about 250 million bucks at all, which tells you exactly how much money they make. So fourth story then, and again, this for me is an example of AI being blamed. So Coinbase is CEO Brian Armstrong basically announced that they were going to be making 700 employees redundant. So that's 14% of their staff. And he said that the reason is AI. And what's really interesting here is that I think his quote is, "We are not just reducing headcount and cutting costs. We're fundamentally changing how we operate, rebuilding Coinbase as an intelligence with humans around the edge aligning it." So this comes as like part of a restructure where he's also saying quite a sensible thing, for my opinion, that he doesn't want to have more than 4 levels of hierarchy at all, from like him all the way down to an entry level position at Coinbase, which that kind of flat hierarchy can actually be really successful in companies. But he's, for me, the two things that are interesting, I'd love to hear your take on this, Leo. One, I feel as though he's, again, like we saw with Jack Dorsey at Base, like he's using at Block, sorry, he's using AI as an excuse to fire employees for maybe restructures that he had in mind already. I would be amazed if some of those aren't rehired, probably on worse contracts. And secondly, the thing that really worries me is this idea of AI at the center and humans around the edge. Whereas actually what we know from all of the previous stories that we've just been talking about, humans need to be in the loop, humans in the loop, at least 2 points. And they are at the very beginning and the very end. So not at the edges, but rather bookended. And then I would say multiple points in between as well. So an interesting story, but for me, one that again is, as Sam Altman coined the phrase, didn't he, like AI washing. It's like blaming AI for structures that are maybe already happening, but interesting to see the direction in which he wants to take his company. And I'm sure you've got some examples for us of companies that have maybe done this less successfully in the past as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We've spoken about quite a few companies who have fired people for what they give as AI reasoning. I think when you kind of zoom out a little bit here and you realize just a few years ago, we had this huge zero interest rate tech boom. And basically, a lot of these companies overhired before AI. So I think now it's a great excuse to fire people for AI and say, and not really tell the truth of, hey, maybe we overhired. Maybe people over at Meta that are supposed to be working 9 to 5s, but they have a breakfast break, a lunch break, a ping pong break, and a dinner break in between that 9 to 5, and they just overhired, and now they're using AI as an excuse. Wouldn't be the first time that a company wasn't telling the truth in regards to why they're firing people, but this is a great excuse. Now, in terms of a specific company who's rolling back on this, if you guys have heard of Klarna, they're a buy now, pay later company, which is basically like a crazy thing where you can buy now, pay later for a 0% interest rate. And then if you don't pay it back, you get hit with interest rates that are just, incredibly high. So their CEO, Sebastian, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. He said, and this is a quote, "We probably over indexed on AI. What you end up having is lower quality." And this was actually in regards to customer service, not any super high level. Again, customer service is super hard, but not replacing people, software engineers or things like that. And he had to roll back on that. And I think the problem that we're going to see here too is if you just fire people, use AI as an excuse, realize that you shouldn't have fired them, and then try to rehire them, there's going to be some bad blood there, and maybe they won't want to come back. They'll already be at a different company that did the opposite. I think a great example is NVIDIA. Jensen has already come out and said many times that we need to rethink what a lot of these job titles are. Instead of firing these people and use it as like a labor amplification rather than labor reduction type of deal. Like how much more power does a single employee have now that they have AI on their tool belt?
Exactly, man. And yeah, and Klarna's a fantastic example. And they literally came back and were like, we're having to rehire everyone because the AI customer service is terrible, which we know to be the case. And yeah, the point you make is really true. That's for customer service, which theoretically is technically less adept than maybe making huge financial transactions, which might be happening within Coinbase. But then, and so what's going to happen with those roles? Yeah. Also, however, maybe customer service is actually something that should always be done by a human because that level of empathy is extremely important. And we know that machines can never do that. So yeah, markets will adjust. As Jen says as well, hey Jen, damage your employer brand when you don't tell the truth on termination reasons. So true, Jen. And I think that a lot of these decisions, as Leah's alluding to, are being made because it it will affect the share price initially less and keep your shareholders on board initially more to say, hey, this is a black swan event, AI, we didn't see it coming, it's that fault. But you've tanked your reputation like 6, 12 months down the line. It's much better to have to come out and be honest about it and say, look, someone made a really good point in the comment here at NUL Online. Use AI as an incentive to rethink your organization and reduce meetings in Slack. Absolutely. Coming out and saying, look, AI offers some opportunities and actually it's encouraged us to really think that maybe we did overhire people. So what we're going to do is we're going to offer them a generous redundancy package. Sorry, that's the socialist in me again. And then we're going to think about a strategy going forward, which means we won't have those overhires going forward as well. And again, using AI to maybe not as an excuse, but to help leverage that. But yeah, and as Des has said there as well, one way to really motivate employees is to fire and rehire them. I don't, I'm sure you just, like in other jobs as well, I know people who've been fired and rehired and the redundancy payments have helped pay off their houses and stuff. So it ends up costing the employer like more money and more goodwill in the long term anyway. So yeah. And as multiple people have put in the chat, it's never the C-suite that ever seems to get the blame for these things, right? So then that brings us on to our final story, which I think is a really interesting one. So this is a long standing story that people will know that Elon Musk and Sam Altman are currently in court at the moment. And the main reason for this is, on paper, that Musk, who was initially involved with OpenAI when it was set up, as Leo said earlier, as a not-for-profit organization for the benefit of humankind. And they basically, one of the lines they were going to cross is they would never float, they would never make a profit, they would always just be for the benefit of human good. We know that's not the case anymore, that they are a profit-making company, and that they're not just a charity. And on the basis of this, I think Musk has taken them to court. And we are seeing some wild accusations in the courtroom. And one of the things that surfaced in the past week is around safety and the fact that basically OpenAI told their board, or Sam Altman told their board, who allegedly they should report to, that they had all these safety features in place, that they took safety and security extremely importantly. But people have come out to testify the complete opposite. So I think Rosie Campbell, who was a former member of the AGI readiness team, she testified, when I joined, it was very much research focused. Over time, it became more like a product focused organization. Both the AGI readiness team and the superalignment team were disbanded in 2024. So that's wild to disband those teams with eight. We talked about earlier, if AGI is going to happen or not is something you need to take very seriously. There needs to be very serious security conversations, and they seem to have been disbanded as it changed its modus operandi. So again, I think this is a very interesting story in terms of what an organization is telling us it's doing versus what it's actually doing, and how seriously it takes these safety issues. Yeah, so we'd love to hear your take on this, Leo.
Yeah, I think it connects back to the first story nicely. 'Cause again, like you mentioned, OpenAI, from nonprofit, for profit, they say they'll do one thing, they do the other. So look at their actions, not their words, as we always say. I think it all really comes back to this general story of the AI race. Like, which company is going to win, which country is going to win, and they're willing to do almost anything to make that happen. And also, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, the disbandment of these two groups, the AGI Readiness and Super Alignment Team, this happened in 2024, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I've had someone recently comment on one of my articles where I used a reference from 2024, and they're like, "That's old news."
Yeah.
Well, like with how fast AI is moving, and I honestly, like, I couldn't really argue it too much, but
I mean,
it's
that's
crazy.
pre-agents, right? Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah,
It feels like
but
a lifetime ago.
yeah, but I think at the same time, 2024 was that real turning point of everything really becoming corporatized as well. So, yeah, we didn't have agents quite yet, but I think the interesting thing about this story is this kind of idea that I have of how can we win the AI race and still have regulation? And I think the answer to that is going to be a lot of people might disagree with this. I think there's two layers to regulation. I think there's public regulation and then there's private. So on the public side, obviously you have which models are released to the public. And as time goes on, we're going to see that the gap in strength between models that are released to the public versus what is private will grow. So that gap will continue to grow into the future. I think Mythos was a great example that recently happened, and probably for good reason that it was not released to the public. So I think that we can regulate, and this is the hot take about this. I think a lot of people will probably not like this. Regulate what is released to the public, deregulate what is available to corporations and to governments. And that's going to probably happen whether we like it or not. It's already happening, and it's just a matter of fact. The government's always going to have better technology than we even realize that they have, and especially that's available to the public. And the reason, I think the big reason I think that we could still win the AI race in the US here if we do this is because if you deregulate completely and just release everything into the public, that leaves us open to distillation attacks. So basically, China, Russia, whoever can basically just do these mild distillation attacks, get our best models, and compete. Whereas if we keep that private and deregulate what's on the private end, which is already happening, we'll be able to win the AI race internally at least. And again, like 90% of the public does not need the strongest models available. So that's basically my take on the whole story.
No, it's a great take, man. There's a really cool Substacker called John Bruton, who's like an economics genius. I'd really recommend people following. And he made a really similar argument when we were talking about this, that look, regulation's important, but actually if you look through market history, like tech, everything, you need an element of deregulation in order for it to become financially viable. So I think what you're proposing makes complete sense, that you have very strong regulations for the consumer, but then you deregulate it at the back end so that people can, with very specific guardrails in place still around AGI, if it happens, super intelligence, etc. What I think is really interesting as well is, as I was doing research for this, Ofcom, which is like the Quality Standards Committee in the UK, they're basically we've got an AI regulation bill, an online security act rather, that if you're in breach of the Online Security Act, which is beyond AI just in general, you can be fined up to 10% of global turnover. so, so Meta have already sued Ofcom for this before they've even announced a judgment, saying that it's too broad, because for Meta, that would be $20 billion, which even for them is quite a lot of money. So I think this is just going to go on, and it'll be really interesting to see, as we've seen in the courtroom, what people say about safety in public, like the CEOs, versus what they actually mean. And then me and you have talked about this several times before. A lot of these guardrails for the consumer are actually quite straightforward to put into place. But I love your split between having the regulation for the consumer, like the business to customer end of things, and then having that deregulation in that more, I guess, some element of business to business, but definitely within government as well. So very smart split, Leo, and one that I've not seen explored before.
Thanks.
Cool. So yeah, so we'll be putting up a post in the next couple of hours that just explores these, shares a few links with everyone. I would invite people to check out the YouTube channel that Leo runs for. Thank you very much for this live and for many others as well. Please do check it out. Thanks everyone for joining us as ever. Like, really great chat today. I learn way more than I bring to these conversations, both from Leo and from everyone in the chat as well. So really appreciate you all tuning in. I know we've got people in Japan and and the Pacific Coast. So yeah, thanks everyone. Really appreciate it. And Leo, thanks as well for hosting. Appreciate it with me, man.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Stay safe. Hammer the heart one last time. Be well. See you next week and go slow.
Bye.